what's his name here? Do we have any public comment?
I don't know. Pursuant to Section 841411 of Nebraska statutes, notice of this meeting was given on February 15, 2019. The meeting will convene at 6:30. Visitors may obtain requests to be heard from staff or any presentation they may have for the meeting. In accordance with policy, a request to be heard from must be submitted to the secretary within the first 5 minutes of the board meeting in order to be heard at this meeting. Agenda items are subject to reordering at the discretion of the board president. Please attend the entire meeting to ensure you're able to hear any discussion. We'll begin in 2 minutes. Pursuant to Section 841411 of Nebraska statutes, the next regular meeting of the Board of Education of Douglas County School District 0001 and Board of Educational Service Unit number 19 will be held on Monday, March 4th, 2019 at 6:30 in the board meeting room of the Teacher Administrative Center, 3215 Cummings Street. The agenda will be kept current and available for public inspection in the office of the Secretary of the Board of Education at the Administrative Building during regular working hours. Pursuant to Section 841412 of Nebraska statutes, the public is hereby informed that a current copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is posted in the board meeting room on the north wall. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Board Member Cassidy will lead us in the OPS Vision and Mission Statement.
Okay, first the vision. Every student, every day, prepared for success. And the mission, Omaha Public Schools prepares all students to excel in college, career, and life.
Thank you. Mr. Ray, roll call, please.
Cassidy,
Here.
Goding, Hallman, Cracky,
Here.
Perlman,
Here.
Ryan,
Present.
Smith,
Here.
Snipe,
Here.
Snow.
Here.
7 present.
Thank you. Dr. Holman and has informed us that she had a prior working engagement and will not be able to attend tonight's meeting. Also, Board Member Goding will be running late. I will entertain a motion to excuse them. Ms. Goding's tardiness, and
Move approval.
there's a motion on the floor to excuse Dr. Holman and Mrs. Goding.
Second.
Second, Nancy Cracky, second by Ms. Ryan. Roll call, please.
Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Cracky.
Aye.
Perlman. Ryan.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Snipe.
Aye.
7 ayes.
Motion carries. Moving on to school spotlight, Mrs. Monique Farmer.
Good evening, Board President Snow, Superintendent Dr. Logan, and members of the board. We are pleased tonight to present Beveridge Magnet Middle School as our OPS Proud Spotlight. In January, the following students, Noemi Gilbert, Nate White, Jaden Pospisil, and Mackenzie Reedy, won the City Quiz Bowl Tournament. Quiz bowls are academic competitions consisting of math, social studies, language arts, science, music, and art. Teams from all over the City of Omaha area compete. The Beveridge Magnet Middle School team won 2 Quiz Bowl tournaments this year, the Bryan High School Tournament and the Concordia High School Tournament. We congratulate these students for their accomplishments, and I'd like to welcome Principal Dr. Lavender and the team's coach, Mr. Guinan, to the podium to share some brief remarks.
Well, we would really like to thank the board, Monique, Dr. Logan, for having us here this evening. As usual, the principal is here getting credit for things that he really doesn't have a whole lot to do with other than to try to stay out of the way. But I would just like to say how much I appreciate this type of an honor, because these activities hit a lot of kids who may or may not be in some of the more mainstream activities. And for instance, we could have 2 more kids here, but they were busy preparing and winning the African American History Challenge. And if you'd like, we could also have Nate give his Optimus Award that he won. So all these kids are busy. They're doing amazing things. They have amazing families. And then we have an amazing staff with an amazing coach, and that's Mr. Guinan. So thank you.
Well, I haven't done a whole lot either, except put them together and try to keep the kids organized. And what we do at the Quiz Bowl is I try to find like a literature person, which is Mackenzie, and then we've got a mathematician, an expert, which is Jaden. Then we got the king of random knowledge, which is Nate, and then the queen of the city Quiz Bowl, which is Noemi. So,
Intimidator.
And she really is the intimidator. That's what we call her. So these are our kids, and we're really proud of them. So if you have some questions for them, they would love to answer. They'd love to.
Well, first, if you could just introduce yourself, what grade you in, and how did you prepare for the Quiz Bowl?
I'm Jaden. I'm in 8th grade. I've been preparing by just having some great teachers that prepare me in classes, and I learn all that knowledge. And I'm also in Acapenta, and that helps me because we study hard, and we do well. And we also have team meetings for Quiz Bowl, where we go over questions that could be on the Quiz Bowl, and that just helps us prepare.
Thank you.
Okay. My name is Nate. I am in 8th grade, and I typically prepare mostly just through teachers and random knowledge that I can't find in random places. And yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Hi, I am Noemi Gilbert. I'm in 8th grade, and I prepare by, I can remember a lot of random facts, and I read a lot, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie Reedy. I'm in 6th grade, and I normally prepare by just reading a lot of books constantly.
Well, thank you guys so much. I'm open up for board members if you guys have any questions.
Oh, we'd like to acknowledge the parents, too.
Oh, yes, and
Can
thank
you
you, parents.
stand?
If you guys could please stand. Thank you. Mrs. Godding.
Well, congratulations. That's a big accomplishment. So I've sat through quite a few quiz bowls. Is there anything in particular that threw any of you off, or did one person on your team read Animal Farm, and did you have lots of Animal Farm questions? You watched what? You watched the movie. Well, that's one way to handle it. I like that. Was there one person that you felt like, okay, you're the specialist on science, or you're the specialist on, okay.
Yeah.
And that's always good to have everybody have their roles. So good job for working as a team and figuring out how to accomplish the end game by working with your skill sets.
Thank you.
Good job.
Mrs. Cassidy.
Thank you. Well, congratulations. What an amazing job all of you have done. So proud. Your school is so proud of you, and all of the district is proud of you. So great job. I know a few of you said 8th grade. Can you tell us maybe where you're thinking of headed to high school? And I think you all are very well prepared. It sounds like you all love to read, and you're going to be really prepared for high school. So those of you that are headed on, tell us where you're headed.
I am going to Central next year.
I have literally no idea.
And I'm going to Burke next year.
Well, thank you guys so much. You make us proud. You make us OPS proud, and we would love to shake your hands and congratulate you, and then take a group photo with your parents as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
I know, they all are. They have great musicals, Amanda. The parents need to come around.
Oh, that's funny.
Probably got to squeeze in. Sorry. Waist up. Okay, we got front and smiles.
Okay, big smiles. 1, 2, 3. And one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay, a little hair.
Mr. Snow, can you come just a little bit? Okay, here we go. He's like a part of the crew. Okay, just a couple more. All right. You good? Yep. Thank you guys again.
All right, moving on to the treasurer's report.
President Snow, Superintendent Dr. Logan, members of the board, The financial statements for the period ended December 31st, 2018 have been submitted for your review. I would be happy to respond to any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Moving on to Superintendent Dr. Cheryl Logan.
Good evening, everyone. President Snow, members of the Board of Education, and those folks who are here this evening for the meeting. I'd like to begin my remarks this evening by extending kudos to James Burks of Omaha Burke High School for bringing home his 4th championship title in state wrestling this past weekend. I also want to note that his brother Jackson Burks also was a state champion and was his 2nd state title. And remarkable family, awesome mom who was here visiting with us a few months ago, right when I think I first started or during my transition. We know that he was under the weather, but he came through and made all of us OPS proud, really super proud. Look forward to seeing James as an Olympian one day here soon, so very excited about that. This morning, I recorded my monthly podcast, Soup for the Soul, thanks to Alec Rome, who is a graduate of Central High School, now a freshman at University of Nebraska-Lincoln, for naming that. And his mom works in nutrition services, and she works at Western Hills Elementary School. So that connection is just special to me. And a shout out to Principal Carrie Murtaugh and the kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Nguyen. She was moving this weekend, by the way. The kindergartners were, I know, I couldn't believe it, and on Saturday during that weather. The kindergartners were lovely. It was a pleasure reading to them, and we had a great time together. The podcast should be posted to social media by early next week. One of the things that I do want to note that when I spoke with students in several classrooms there and asked them about whether or not they loved their snow day, they said no, they prefer to be in school with their teachers. That means that those are some really fantastic teachers at Highland, so I want to give them a super, super shout out. I went into a first grade class today with a brand new teacher. Every one of her children were reading and reading on grade level. It was remarkable, and she really deserves that shout out. So really a fantastic job there at Highland Elementary, and they have a new principal, Mrs. Murtaugh. Last week I had the opportunity to speak at Offutt Air Force Base. I think it's my 2nd visit there to Strategic Command during the Black History Month celebration, and I did meet Miss Teen Omaha. Her name is Daisy Suttereth, and she was fantastic. She happens to be a student at Papillion La Vista Public Schools, and one of the things that she noted in her remarks were that although there are several different districts in Omaha, she said it's one thing that she finds interesting. They're all really the same. All the kids are really the same, and I thought that was wonderful and probably needs to be highlighted more than it is. In terms of inclement weather days, we've had 4 days to date. We do have a bank of days that we built into our school year. Hopefully we won't have to use any more with the arrival of a major snowstorm this weekend. We do expect interrupted schedules to several sporting events to include the state swim meet, which is tomorrow and Saturday. We wish all of our swimmers well. Shout out to the parents at Central High School who invited me to go with them, and I told them I don't like to drive in the snow, so I'll see whether or not I make it there. But I'm really wishing all those students well. I know we have a significant number of swimmers from Burke High School and from Central High School that will be participating in the state swim meet. When we are making those decisions, please know that it is always our priority for student safety first, but we do have to return to school at some point, and just because all the snow hasn't melted doesn't mean we won't be in school. So just a reminder to those, and to those who send me notes on social media, thank you. I will say that the tone of all those notes has really shifted, probably because of my direct approach to the way we all should be expected to be treated on social media. It's very important for me that we teach those lessons to our young people, really important. So I will continue to do so, and they've been making some much better choices. Super special shout out to Carson Hudkins at Burke High School, who is now my biggest friend and supporter on Twitter. Love you too, Carson. I do, actually. He's fantastic. Last week we had our second Facebook Live discussion with parents. Really appreciate the opportunity for parents and some educators and a couple of kids who were supposed to be in class who were on Facebook Live last week to ask questions about things that are going on in schools, and so really appreciate that. I believe that congratulations to Beveridge Magnet Middle School drama teacher Anthony Schick and student Dominic Torres. They're both, Schick appeared in the Omaha Community Playhouse production of Mice and Men, and Torres appeared in The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, which is a great story about an autistic individual that I recommend if you haven't read the book. Please make sure you do so, and if it's still playing, to get a chance to see it. Northwest High Magnet High School coach Shannon Walker and senior Mylisa Smith. Walker received the Coach of Character Award and Smith the Spark Award from the College of St. Mary's during its Lead Like a Girl luncheon on February 6th. Very proud of all of those folks. This concludes my remarks for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Logan. Board members, any comments? Okay, then moving on to public comment. We have one speaker who has submitted a request to speak form. The board has adopted policy 8346, which provides public comment for a period of 1 hour. That same policy limits individual speakers to a maximum of 5 minutes. We ask that you respect that time limit. Mr. Ray will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining and when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you are in need of an interpreter, please let Mr. Ray know, and one would be provided for you. If the subject of your public comment is related to a particular student or staff member, we ask that you not mention the student or staff member by name and instead provide that information to Mr. Ray. He will assist us in looking those types of details for you. If you do not get an opportunity to speak and would like to submit any written commentary, please provide that to Mr. Ray. He will make sure each board member gets a copy. As a reminder, we ask that you please spell your name and state your address before you begin your public comment. It is now 6:50, and our speaker is Robert Miller.
Good evening, Robert Miller, R-O-B-E-R-T-M-I-L-L-E-R. I live at 7301 North 107th Avenue in Omaha, Nebraska, 68122. Poet and writer Clint Smith III had 4 principles for his students when he was a classroom educator: read critically, write consciously, speak clearly, and tell the truth. These principles have been a guiding mantra for the OEA Collective Bargaining Table team since we began preparing over the summer. Read critically, write consciously, speak clearly, and tell the truth. We came to the table with a financial proposal that reflected exactly what was outlined at the Nebraska statute. We came with ideas of health insurance and adjustments to compensation to show our long service educators that we want to retain them. We came with proposals that reflect the concerns collected through survey of our educators, including the staggering number of teachers who must hold second or third jobs and don't feel valued by their employer or the board. We reviewed the concerns reflected by the Superintendent's entry plan report about meeting the needs of all students, our children's mental health needs, efficient and equitable use of funds, and openness and transparency. We've reduced our requests over time as part of the bargaining process. We've asked, listened, measured, wrote, prepared, and then we bargained in public. Collaborative bargaining is an adversarial exercise of labor versus management, and unless and until management recognizes labor as an equal partner. We had very high hopes that we were entering a new era. We wanted to start our talks weeks ahead of the December 10th first session. The district said no. We sought to increase the formal collaboration between the district and the OEA to address the concerns reflected by both the OPS and the OEA surveys. This would beneficially increase our formal collaboration from 4 meetings to 8 a year. The district said no. We were open to exploring health insurance options that could potentially save millions of dollars. The district said no. So what does the district want? Well, the district wants teachers to accept fewer dollars in their paychecks next year, and apparently in the future, because it's asking us to make a sacrifice. Look at these teachers. The price tags they are wearing are examples of their personal money out of their pockets that they invest in their classrooms, for their students, for school supplies, door decorations, bulletin boards, online resources, and they even provide snacks to those adolescents who are in part of their clubs at the end of the day. Our community's teachers already sacrifice. And how do we treat someone who we want to make a sacrifice? Do we invite them into the relationship, or do we wall them out? Do we increase our connection with them through respect and transparency, or do we mount a last-minute surprise attack against them? Make no mistake, the board's attempt to count the district's actuarially required contribution payment as a teacher's compensation is unattainable. Throwing this grenade at our teachers on the last day of bargaining as the last and final offer from the district and then unilaterally declaring an impasse is not showing respect. The ARC payment is not compensation. It is not our obligation, but the law, it is the board's obligation. Just as it was the board's obligation to oversee decisions made by OSERs and to disapprove or approve those decisions before a dime was spent. Attempting to push this responsibility onto teachers during a bargaining is contemptible. Placing the ARC on the table of compensation has severely undermined the faith that we have the stakeholders in the Better Together coalition. A coalition that was formed to address our retirement situation collaboratively. How is that collaboration? The district stated that at the table it wants support and partnership to find a way of its financial challenges, but this is not how you treat partners. Our bargaining was delayed until December. We were scolded and called disgruntled by your chief negotiator. We made repeated attempts to problem solve and continually were rebuffed.
1 minute.
We bargained in public so that public can see that we value, that the board values, what the board values places on professionals and parents that have entrusted our children with every day. We keep our membership informed through social media so they can see and understand the process we are speaking up for them as colleagues and partners. When you refused to enter the true problem-solving partnership and then you walked away from negotiations, you walked away not just from your staff, but from our students. The decision of this board and administration in bargaining in an adversarial manner
30
into the
seconds.
problem solved by laying all responsibilities on the backs of teachers, nurses, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, and administrators, on the adults that have committed their lives to the profession, is going to drain the district and its treasure and jeopardize the health of our schools and the education of our students. Which leads us to ask and wonder, what is really going on?
Moving on to the consent agenda. We did have a board member that wanted some items pulled, so for members of the board, you could see those adjusted. It's in class today that has been pulled, as well as the PeopleSoft change request has been pulled as well, and they will be addressed later on in tonight's meeting. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda that is here before us.
Before we do, I'd ask that another item be pulled off the consent agenda. And that's I-1A.
One second. The workshop, the Friday, February 1 workshop, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we will pull that. So I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda that is before us right now, with the exception of I-1A.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor by Ms. Snipes, second by Ms. Cracky. Roll call, please.
Cassidy,
Aye.
Gadding,
Aye.
Cracky,
Aye.
Froman,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Snipe,
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
7-9.
Motion carries. 7-I or 8-I?
8-I, I'm sorry.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to, our lobbyist is not here yet, but we will move the items around a little bit and do the budget update until he gets here. So moving on to, we're just going to skip down and move around on this agenda. Move on to J2A.
Thank you. Good evening, President Snow, Superintendent Dr. Logan, members of the board. Tonight, I have for you a brief update on the 2019-2020 budget process to date. To start, I'd like to give you an overview of the timeline that we've been working under this year. The budget work actually kicked off in November, late November, with has some high-level budget modeling to help us get a view of understanding where we were this year and what some of the expense changes we may have going into next year as we put the budget together. After that, we moved in quickly to work at the department levels, doing deep dives across the budget, looking at all areas of spending to really get a handle on where there were opportunities to take dollars out of the budget and also to understand where dollars needed to go into the budget as we go from year to year. Right now, we're in what we consider to be phase 3 of the budget, where we are still working that deep dive piece and we are building out elements of the budget, and I'll talk about that in more detail here in a moment. That work will continue as we move toward the end of March, where we hope to have a good look at where we are with the budget in terms of all the pieces that are available at that point in time. There potentially will still be some pieces that are not known, but we should have a good look on the pieces that are. This is also the time of year where we will continue to provide updates for the board and solicit input and also public input as we work through the budget process. The goal will be to have budgets available at the school site level by the end of May, and then our formal budget adoption will be in September. Some key dates that we keep in mind as we're working through the process: we will work on enrollment verification in March. That helps us understand the right staffing at each school. State aid certification is set for early March. That doesn't always happen on that timeline. There is April 15th is the target for notifications for certified and non-certified staff. And then we will get another look at the tax side of our revenue equation in August as we get our final tax receipts for this fiscal year. Phase 3, as I talked about, is where we're at today in the budget process. And just to give you a few highlights of things that are going on. A lot of deep dive work has been going on, as I mentioned, just a couple of places that we're looking at. We are doing work analyzing program spending by participant. We are also looking at some analysis on overtime and extra pay. Salary scenarios will be completed as negotiations continue to move forward. We will not know those numbers until those are completed. Staffing conferences where principals and HR are meeting to understand the needs of each individual school and to set staffing for the school for next year. That work is underway now and will be completed later in March. There is expense detail build-out going on. That's an exercise where we are looking at every single expense type that exists in the budget, and we are going through an analysis of all of that spending at a department level to see what the requirements are for next year. A couple of places that I can speak to that we're specifically looking at are contract services and supply budgets. Those are areas where we are digging in deeply as an example of some of the work we're doing this year. Off-formula allocations, the work on those is also underway. That's where we take budgets or pieces of budgets within departments, and that's where we create the allocations to each of the school sites. There are budgets across a variety of allocations there. Instructional support allocations, operations allocations make up the majority of that work on those off formulas. And obviously, as we go through this process, we will identify new budget gaps and we will identify new budget solutions, and we will continue to track those and monitor as we work through this phase of the budget process. Preliminarily, a few items that we have in as placeholders within the budget now. Obviously, we're still working the final numbers on these. We have a revenue assumption of 2.4% increase. We are working a budget with a targeted unassigned fund balance above 17%. Clearly, as I've mentioned, with contract negotiations still going on, we do not know what those numbers and those inputs will be in the budget at this point. The textbook adoption that was did not go into the budget last year will be in this year's budget. We have a $1.5 million budget increase related to the new Gifford Park Elementary School. As you saw in the last board meeting, we approved we have built into the budget the proposed $2.2 million increase in the transportation contract. And at this point, we have a placeholder in the budget for a $25.5 million ARC for next year. With all of those pieces, again, as preliminary numbers, we believe that we have a gap to solve for as we look to balance the budget of approximately $10 million. Some places that we are looking at as we evaluate the way to go after that $10 million. Again, these are potential sources of funds. None of these will come out to be exactly this amount, and there may be other sources identified as we continue through the process. Contract services is a place we are looking line by line to really make sure that every contract service that we are budgeting is a contract service that is moving forward the vision and the mission of the organization. Equity adjustment is a place that we are evaluating, making sure that we have the right that classroom sizes are equitable across the district. Program efficiencies is another place where we continue to look for added efficiencies. And then an overall look at redundancy and efficiency across the district is another potential source of funding as we go through this process. And then supplies itself, the actual supplies that we purchase to move the district forward. We believe there may be some opportunity there as we look at places where we can perhaps solve some of our potential gap. So that's the work that's currently underway and the timeline that we're on. I would be happy to respond to any questions that you may have.
My laptop just froze. Mr. Perlman.
Thank you. On page 4, the new elementary school cost $1.5 million. Is that expected to be the annual cost, or is that a little bit lower because of some temporary state aid, or can you kind of flesh that out a little bit?
This is believed to be an annual cost. This does not have an offset of temporary state aid against it. So this is the expense side of the equation. It does not reflect the additional revenue. The 2-year window for new school revenue is not reflected against that.
Okay, thanks.
Mrs. Gotti?
I guess to follow up on that, so we'll have the 2-year window. Do we know what that revenue is? Because then we'll have to pick that up after 2 years.
I don't have those numbers at this point.
So I have a question for you. I think it's actually on the next page. Whoops. My question is related to the ARC. The increase, so beyond actuarial estimates of $24.5 million, is that an updated number based on fourth quarter investment returns? Then updated again based on that?
The $24.5 million is the last actuarial update that we had for the ARC. We do not have a new update at this point, and we will not have anything until later in the spring.
Right.
So the $1 million addition is an estimate of what that might be, but it is not an actuarial estimate.
Right. Okay, so the $24.5 million estimate came from Kavanaugh McDonald?
Yes.
And when was that? What date? I mean, what was that based on? Projection of December 31st, or was that based on?
No, this is an estimate that was prepared, I believe, at the time of the last payment calculation, which would have been last spring.
Okay. So we hadn't seen it yet in all of the data that we saw.
Correct.
So it was before the $24.5 million was before the market.
Yes.
Difficulties
in the fourth quarter that we have not seen we have not seen a new estimate since that.
Right, so it could be different than that number.
Yes,
Okay, yep,
it could be.
got that. I guess I want to just compliment you guys on the team, Dr. Logan and you on some of the potential source of funds. I appreciate you looking at the contract services. I think that's been a critical area to be looked at for a while, so I appreciate that. I appreciate the equity adjustments. My schools took some pretty big hits, and I know you and Dr. Logan and I have talked about that, so I appreciate a re-review of that to ensure that every child, no matter what school they're at, has adequate resources. And so I think staff in the buildings where that's happened will greatly appreciate that. So I just want to thank you for some of the things that we're looking at, and we'll stay tuned as what anticipated, because of that, we know that it'll be a challenge for that March 1 state aid certification date. Will that challenge, I mean, you'll be able to continue to work, but at what point does that become critical to know that information as we move forward?
Well, understanding where our state aid number is going to be is obviously critical, because that is more than 50% of our revenue equation. So that one is very much a need to know. It doesn't in any way slow down any of the work we're doing at this point. I think, if we got to late spring and we didn't have that information, that would be more impactful. But at this point, it's not slowing anything down.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation. I think it was it was a great highlight and overview of what you're doing, and I appreciate it.
Mr. Perlman.
Just to follow up on my last question, I had a lot of questions about the cost of operating a new school before the bond was passed. This was in the spring and summer of 2017, and I know that was before your time here, but the administration told the board members here that a new elementary school, like the one across the street, would cost $3 million a year to operate, and the 2-year temporary aid would be $1.3 million a year. And so if I could get some updated numbers and how that cost has apparently been cut in half, I'd like to know the answer to that.
Sure, we can go back and look at that. That estimate was before my time, and as I mentioned, these are some preliminary numbers we have in. It does not mean that they will not change and move around some as we move through the process, but I'd be happy to go back and look at that.
Okay, thanks.
If I'm correct, I believe when that school opens, it's not opening all the way K-5. It's a soft opening, correct, Dr. Logan?
No, it's going to open, it will open K-5. It will not open at capacity. So it will open with significantly less students. So if it was projected out that it was going to have the capacity of students, that it would make sense that the number was half. That's what's logical to me, but we'll find out the exact answer from someone who was in finance prior to my time here.
These numbers do reflect the expected enrollment and not a full enrollment. The numbers, the 1.5 that I spoke to.
So not full enrollment? Is that, and enrollment capacity is 500? Is that correct?
It's about right, 475.
Okay.
Well, I have a quick question, and this will probably be directed towards Dr. Logan. Could you explain, we go back to slide 2 if we can?
Sure.
Explain the public input for the board and the community as well.
What will happen is, once we have looked at and identified the exact areas, again, our team has been working on this actually since November, to look at the where we can, first of all, find some redundancies and to do everything we can so that we do not impact schools in terms of their teachers and in terms of programs. And so what you saw today reflects that. And the minus 10 million reflects a protection of what I call protection of the base. No staffing changes for schools. Any staffing changes would be, happen outside of schools. What will happen once we are ready to present the budget, we will present the budget proposal and then have at least 2, perhaps 3 opportunities for the community to have input on what has been proposed prior to adoption. What it will also allow us to do is to have updated numbers from state aid, hopefully during that process, and also to have more accurate numbers about what our ARC actually is. You will note that we are working to have our fund balance. We drew down our fund balance significantly last year for last year's budget, or the current year budget rather. And one of the things that we know we need to do is to ensure that that fund balance is healthier, especially in the current climate where we have an ARC that is variable. So if the ARC goes up $5-6 million, we won't have to go back to the budget because we've accounted for that in our fund balance. So those are some of the things. We will have at least 2 meetings here and perhaps do a road show based on whether or not the board wants to go to another location. It's customary in some larger districts to perhaps have a meeting in north, south, and centrally so that you can have accommodate the public's opportunity to have input in the budget process. But we will have pre-identified all of the cuts. I continue to receive information from the public about suggestions, and many of those suggestions are great and actually have been already incorporated, especially in terms of contracted services that was mentioned by, I believe, Ms. Gotting, and areas where we can have efficiencies. I know that administration cuts are something that are always going to be a part of any sort of times when you're in a tight budget, and those also have been are accounted for in this budget proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. Because sorry, Mrs. Utterback, we're gonna go back to where we originally started. We're gonna do legislative update since our lobbyist is here, John Lindsay. And real quick, everybody is looking at the positions that the legislative committee has taken. I will go through, and I know there has one board member that has wanted to remove, have a separate vote on LB 161, which is the Eliminate Learning Community. The committee's recommendation is opposed. So if everyone had an opportunity to look it over, is there anything that anybody wants pulled out of the numbers that I'm probably going to read? That I will read? Okay. All right. So if I'm correct, I'll go through and read the bill and the position that the committee is taking. We met on February 8th as well as the 15th. The last action we took was on the 4th. So LB 31, support. LB 390, oppose. LB 495, monitor with research. LB 497, oppose. LB 506, oppose. LB 507, monitor with research. LB 508, monitor with research. LB 515, oppose. LB 530, oppose. LB 588, oppose. LB 589, oppose. LB 614, monitor with research. LB 644, oppose. LB 656, monitor with research. LB 662, oppose. LB 668, oppose. LB 670, oppose. LB 671, oppose. LB 674, monitor with research. LB 676, oppose. LB 677, monitor with research. LB 679, monitor with research. LB 695, oppose. LB 728, oppose. And then also, we have a position statement on here about the retirement system, OSERS, the harmonized OSERS with Nebraska School Employees Retirement System, which is our position statement. We entertain a motion to approve these positions that are being recommended by the Legislative Committee. Oh, Ms. Crackey.
The one that I would like to pull out is the learning community, and I want to point out something about...
We already removed 161 for you. So we'll talk about that after we do this one.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Are we good?
Yeah, fine.
Mr. Smith?
Do we have a stance on 667? Page 11.
Mr. Lindsay, which is the Youth Opportunities and Learning Occupations Act, sorry. Appropriate 20 million funds, sorry.
Trying to get over there. Okay.
Can you explain the bill there, if you have any information? If not, we can get back to...
Yeah, I can tell you what the, roughly what the bill does. It would create create a program by which kids in, I think, 8th grade and junior year would yeah, it's to train kids for high demand jobs and get them started at a younger age in getting into those tracks. And it does request a $20 million appropriation, which is unlikely given what will be some really bad forecast figures that'll come out end of next week. But that's what it's trying to do, is to get high demand workforce oriented training at an earlier level in schools.
And the committee hasn't taken a position on it, and
no.
At this time. So, I mean, if it's something that you would like the committee, we would discuss that and then make a decision if we want to take a position on that. I recommend it to the board. So we could discuss this a little bit more in depth on Friday. Mr. Perlman?
I just want to make sure that everyone on the board understands completely what it means when we support harmonization of OSERS and Nebraska School Employee Retirement System. So can we maybe spend some time talking about what exactly that means?
As a board, or having...
Yes.
Okay.
Do you want me to?
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Over the past several years, the legislature has been trying to get the two NPERS, the state retirement system, and OSERS in alignment, or we use the term harmonization. It's trying to get the two to be as similar as possible in their benefits and in their contributions, with the goal being that teachers should be treated as closely as possible to being the same, whether you're teaching in OPS or whether you're teaching across the street in another district. And so that's been the goal of doing that. And it's been everything from from changing, like I say, benefits to real technical things like how you purchase creditable service. And when they have made changes to the state plan over the last several years, they have been including the same changes to go to OSERS as well. It's at the point now the two are pretty well aligned, but there are small and generally technical changes that do have to take place. And so that's what they're looking at, is as those changes come in, that they are going to change to the state plan, that they would also adopt those to OSERs.
And so we're talking about things like, what's left that's different? Is COLA one of those things?
Is what?
Cost of living adjustment?
I believe, yeah, I think the retirees and OSERs have a COLA. I think legal put together a comparison of the two, and I can't remember exactly which ones were different on the two.
Is it a fair statement to say, generally speaking, benefits under OSERs are superior to that of the Nebraska School Employees Retirement System?
I don't think so.
I'm sorry?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think because the change has been made, and it depends on when you started teaching in either of the systems. Changes to a retirement plan can only be made going forward because a retirement plan is a contract with the employees. So any employee who is already in that plan is promised those benefits. So when they make changes, it would say, if they made changes this year, for example, it would be for teachers starting after July 1, 2019. So it would only be prospective changes. So over the years, as they brought those together, the benefits together, the benefits that are seen by teachers starting at the same time, and again going forward, are going to be roughly equivalent. There was a time when, yes, OPS's benefits were richer than what you would see in NPERS.
Okay.
Mrs. Godding.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the COLA adjustment hasn't been in there on the OSER side for, decades and decades. Is that correct?
Yeah, as I understand, it's a retiree benefit.
Right,
Those were already retired.
But the COLA adjustment was put in. Do you know what year that was put in? I've heard people talk about it, so it makes me think. It wasn't always that way.
No, and it's changed dramatically.
Exactly. So there's a whole history of that COLA that you probably have to understand in order to really have the conversation, and maybe that's what we need to ask is, when it went in, and then, as you spoke, the layers of individuals who, depending on their start date, have the adjustment and what that adjustment is, correct?
Yeah. That statute section, if you read it, it reads as a history of the change in COLA. It goes through, and it's for employees beginning at this period of time, the COLA is this, or not to exceed this, and it goes down and has been reduced over a period of time.
Right. So I just want to, it's not like it's one simple thing.
No.
It's been very complicated through the time period, right? That it's existed.
Yes. Yeah. It's been ratcheted down, and it's the number now is maybe 3%, not to exceed, but it's it was really high for a while, but
right.
Thank you. Anybody would like to make a motion to approve the legislative positions that Yes.
Just briefly, I'll need to abstain from the policy regarding NPERS based on being a vested participant in NPERS. So make that.
Abstain from the whole thing, or you're talking
just
about
a position statement?
The position statement. Okay.
So moved. Second.
This motion on the floor by Ms. Ryan, second by Mrs. Cassidy. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Godding.
Aye.
Cracky.
Aye.
Perlman.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Snipe.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
8 aye.
Motion carries. We are now looking at LB 161. committee's position which is the learning community, elimination of the learning community. The committee's recommendation to the board is oppose. Mr. John Lindsay, could you briefly explain? I do believe we do have a board member that might have a question on that, or...
Yeah, the bill would, is fairly straightforward, although it's 143 pages long. It eliminates the learning community, and it disperses the assets, or requires dispersal of the assets and liabilities to the member districts.
Thank you. I have a...
Thank you.
Ms. Kraken.
I want to point out, in looking at our schools and what they have as services in them, we have 29 schools that have a pre-K room and 21 schools that have a Head Start program. And for me, the necessity of continuing or going on with the learning community is something that I think we really need to be serious about looking at, and if we could be using resources and things in a better way than what is being happening now. I have not looked at it favorably before, so I really haven't changed my mind. But in pointing out what OPS does do and has done, I think we have done very well with those services already. So I am opposed.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to approve the legislative committee's position opposed to LB 161, eliminate learning community.
So moved. Second.
There's a motion on the floor by Ms. Ryan, second by Mrs. Cassidy. Any discussion? Mrs. Godding.
So the one thing that I think, when we talk about resources, we don't have directly those resources that are coming in from that learning community tax. It's going into the program itself, and so that's additional resources that we get on top of, which I agree, we do have wonderful pre-K and then we have Head Start programs as well. But those are additional resources that, from what I've observed, are really a benefit very much to families in helping them prepare their students for school. And granted, it does not touch everyone, and I understand that. And but I also understand that if the learning community went away and the assets were divided up, there's probably some obligations still left on the building that exists. And so I'm always looking at it from a financial perspective. The two things that I see is we get additional resources, and the second thing I see is that we don't have to pay for a building that we don't have the money to pay for right now, and that partially drives my decision. The one thing I see as a positive is Class 4 school district, and that would be a lovely thing to have happen, but that's not going to probably happen either. So, so therefore, I'm opposed to it for those reasons, and they are strictly from a financial perspective of Omaha Public Schools.
Thank you. Mrs. Cassidy.
Thank you. From what I know of the learning community, I've learned a little bit about it from a few committees that I'm on. It serves a tremendous amount of families, in particularly North Omaha and South Omaha. And I think I would be hard-pressed to find someone, at least in South Omaha, because I have visited that learning community center, and I think that it would be a mistake to take those services away from those two communities, North and South Omaha. In fact, I'm not sure on this, but I believe there is a waiting list. I believe the North Omaha location has a waiting list of families that are wanting to be a part of this program and are not. And I know the South Omaha location, it used to be a little laxed where families could join, and then culturally a lot of the families in South Omaha might take some longer vacations and go back to places that they originate from, kind of a cultural aspect to their makeup. But I know the learning community used to kind of save their spot. They are so packed that they can no longer be lax because they have so many families that are trying to be a part of the learning community and participate. So for those reasons and from what I have learned from families in my own area, I think the learning community it's very valuable, and it would just be a disservice to change that.
Mrs. Cracky.
I have a question. Of those schools and those students that you are talking about that need that service, I'm wondering if you can see on the sheet of paper of the schools that have the pre-K and the Head Start, do those families get served there, or are they not able to go to those schools that are in your area that offer those other programs?
I'm not aware if the families, from what I know, it's families with a lot of different age children in schools. They might have 3, 4, 5 children. I'm not sure statistic-wise, if they have children specifically in pre-K or in kindergarten, but the families that they serve, I know it's not a limitation. They don't have to have one child just in pre-K. It's families that have however many children they have.
I do know from the past, in going to some of these schools out in North Omaha, they do have family rooms. South Omaha had some family rooms also. So I think the parents are getting some services in addition with the programs in those buildings. So I don't think the parents are being locked out of some help and classes and different things they can do. So I would take a lot to change my mind. And so if I'm just the one member, I have to stand on my own. I have too many people that have given me input too much to a lot of the things, and that's my position, so I'm sorry.
I do know that if we were inclined to have someone from the learning community come and present what services they actually offer, statistic-wise, how many they're serving, they're more than willing to come and talk to the board and give us more details.
All right, then
absolutely.
At the same time, I would like to have our discussion include our pre-K services, what that includes, and our Head Start programs as well. If we're going to go there, let's go with all of it.
Mr. Smith.
I agree with you, John Tracy. The learning community does so much for our population, and it also engages the parents on a whole different level. And a lot of times parents are intimidated by OPS and don't really want to work, or don't feel like there's open arms to really work and provide those wraparound services for their students and for the families. And I've seen it firsthand. I know some of the work that they do, and I've actually helped and volunteered and donated things to provide for some of those families that are in the community. Also, we got to keep in mind, if we're going to work on closing that achievement gap, it's going to start with those learning communities, and the earlier we can reach those kids, the better. So we want to make things easier for those teachers once they get to kindergarten and first grade. And oftentimes you may have a mom or a family who has a pre-K and a third grader, and so they definitely need those services.
Thank you. Mr. Perlman.
Yes. I think we're actually talking about maybe a couple different things, because I think we'd all agree that the services that are being provided to young learners is important. I don't think anyone here would oppose that. I think the issue is the best way to do it. For those who followed the history of the learning community and how it was established and where it's at today versus its origins, would know that what it is today is nothing, I don't think, of what the original vision of the learning community was, which was a compromise to avoid the breakup of OPS into 3 distinct school districts. And then the rug was pulled under us when the common levy went away, which included a lot of state senators who represented OPS, who were actually present but decided not to even vote. They didn't even vote no, they just didn't even vote. I don't think a lot of people realize that. And so I sat down with the folks at the learning community after I discussed it at last board meeting, and the work that they do, and actually most of the work I think that they don't do directly. Their money is funneled through other agencies in North and South Omaha, not to discount the work that they do put in, because they do put in work. But I guess my point is I think the questions and the discussion is a good discussion. I think there's some valid questions about how opaque the spending is, what the goals are, what the transparency of a new private board will be, and I think there is going to be more accountability than some private boards, because the spending that's going to take place with this new board, with the learning community, the spending will actually have to also go through the public elected board as well at the learning community, so that was good to hear. That was something I didn't know. But I think it's good that we examine the millions of dollars that is spent, and whether or not the current model is the best model we can have, or the other 12 districts in the learning community will be able to spend the money on their own. I don't think that the money would be dedicated as well by each individual school district as it is currently now by the learning community. I think it's important. I think early childhood education is important enough to have a dedicated standalone entity to deliver those services. That was the best value I got when I met with the folks at the learning community this past week. Because I had a lot of the same hard questions that you did, Ms. Cracky. But when you think about how important is early childhood education, and is it important enough, do we value it enough to have a standalone agency to focus on it, and as long as the money's not being misspent or wasted, and there's value there, then I would still support the learning community, because I think it's evolving at least in a good direction, even though it's not anything as it was originally envisioned.
I would like to note that it's, my understanding is that the accountability of the academic success in measuring them from one year to the next is not altogether as significant as we would like it to be. Also, I thought that at the last time this was discussed, I thought that we were going to be getting some numbers of how many students from each of those learning community schools have how many students in them with their percentage, but I don't know that it was formally asked to have that happen. I thought there was discussion about it happening, but maybe we can go there and...
There was a discussion, and what board leadership decided to do was to make sure that instead of having OPS having to answer these questions, to just direct those board members to the learning community, to actually have the learning community provide that data, because as a district, we would still have to get the learning community to provide that data for us. So, and Mr. Proman went to meet with the CEO of the learning community, Dave Patton, and we did send out an email.
And I have some materials I can share with you. They gave me some to share with the board. I can bring those for you.
And I like Dave Patton, so that is not the problem.
No, I understand. All right, so the item on the agenda is to oppose LB 161, eliminate the learning committee. Roll call, please.
Cracky?
I'm voting to oppose it, so it's a yes?
No.
It's a no, okay. The wording is tricky, thank you.
Perlman?
So the vote is whether or not I
To
would
support the position from the
to
legislative
oppose
committee.
it. So it's like a double negative. Well, I oppose it, correct. So are we
Aye.
voting aye then?
Yes.
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Snipe?
Aye.
Snow?
Aye.
Cassidy?
Aye.
Goding?
Aye.
7-0.
Motion carries. Moving on to item J1B, in class today. I believe we're going to have, yes, Dr. Logan will be able to answer the questions. I believe Mr. Perlman wanted that item pulled.
I see an A, but I don't see a B.
Mrs. Goding.
So I actually also had a question on this, so I'm glad it got pulled. My question is, and I just want to understand the synergy between the program that we have in-house where we're tracking all of the tardies and absences that the principals can use. Will this have synergy with that, or is this specifically to communicating with families, hey, your child's been absent from school? I guess I just wanted to know, is there any crossover?
It's different. What In Class Today helps, so let me talk a little bit about the creators of In Class Today. One of the things that the folks who created In Class Today are some of the same folks who do some of the analytics for some of the large websites that really encourage you to change your behavior. So folks who have worked with Amazon One Click, where they did very well in terms of creating those kinds of analytics and using brain research and behavioral psychology. And they formed a group where they work in the nonprofit sector on what they call very hard, wicked social problems. And they decided to work on absenteeism. They work with some of the real large districts, large, very poor districts. And they do what is called randomized controlled trials, where they send literature to families. They use snail mail, they did not feel like, the researchers did not know that the snail mail was going to work as well as it did, so it was really a discovery, to change parents' beliefs about their child's attendance. They work with the lowest 50% of attendees, and what they found out from parents using qualitative and quantitative data was that parents in that range really believed, their belief system was that their child's attendance was excellent, and that their child was attending at the same rate as other children. And so one of the things that In Class Today does is gives parents information about where their child is attending, these are the lower attendees, where the children that are their similar peers, their grade level peers, are attending in their school, and they're attending much better, and then where children in the district are attending. It's really about changing belief systems for families in order to, first of all, for them to understand the importance of daily attendance, its connection to reading on grade level, proficiency on exams, and then high school completion. And so that's what In Class Today. It doesn't mean that we stop doing any of the other things that we have to do around attendance. This is a very different approach around, like I said, behavioral psychology, working with our parents, because we know that we can't do better. Unless you know better, you can't do better. And that's kind of what In Class Today does.
Okay, no, thank you very much, because I'm familiar with the whole behavioral psychology and using analytics to drive change.
Yeah.
And so that actually is wonderful, and if it can make a change here, how wonderful. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Sure.
All right, I will entertain a motion to approve item J1B, In Class Today.
Move.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Smith, second by Mrs. Gadding. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Pullman.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Snipe.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Gadding.
Aye.
Crackett.
Motion carries. Moving on to item J1C, PeopleSoft. I will entertain a motion to approve that item. That is before us as well.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Perlman, second by Mrs. Cassidy. Any discussion? Mr. Perlman?
Yes, I would just like, I tried making heads or tails of this, but it just seems like it's like in a different language to me. Can you just kind of explain to us what's going on here?
Sure. So Alteryx allows us to give people, in particularly HR, the ability to do complex calculations without the need to code. So in a process such as PeopleSoft, where I have different unions and different calculations for each union, this allows the ownership of that change, if it shifts, to be done at a HR level and not have to have complex coding behind it. So this also gives us predictive analysis, so we'll be able to allow research or others to do predictive analysis to then outflow to Tableau, which, as you know, is like OpenBook is a Tableau dashboard. So the tool itself is a predictive tool, but it doesn't need coding to be able to do its calculations. So for the average end user, just some minor training can be done to do a complex code that you wouldn't necessarily have to do within the program itself.
Sort of English.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Mr. Perlman.
I was going to say, can you explain creditable year so everybody will know what creditable year
Right.
is?
So in the board policy, what we have is every year is calculated for retirement, and based upon the union is and the term that the person works calculates whether that's a credible year or not. So for instance, as of August 31st of this last year, I had 4.3 as a credible year, 4 years, 3 months. And so, but my calculation as a person in the district is based upon 261 days. A person in a different union would have a different set of numbers to calculate that credible year. Does that bring some clarity? So, and you might have, one thing I would say that complicates this, something like pair to educator, you might have somebody transition in the middle of a year from one credible year calculation to another.
Mrs. Scotty.
Okay, sorry. Go on.
And I guess I would just point out the complexity of that. I learned when we were going through trying to get everybody on step into the step that they should be on because of maternity leave. And so those are all complicating factors. And so if it can be intuitive in the system versus having to write program or manually try to say, oh, this person was gone from here to here on maternity leave.
Right.
And so they don't have that time period for credible year. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Any other questions?
Mr. Perlman?
I guess one question I always have with these, I guess I'm looking for the right phrase, a change request is, how come was this not something that could have been anticipated when the thing was done initially?
So this is currently a manual process. When you see this as a PeopleSoft change request, it's using PeopleSoft data, but we're actually pulling that PeopleSoft data out to do the calculation and then injecting it back into PeopleSoft. So while it is a change request and we're using Accenture because they're closest to that data, they were in with us in the last PeopleSoft upgrade. They understand how the calculation would need to be made. That's currently manual. That's why we used a change request in this instance. There's a labor effort in this solution to help do the calculation.
Is this something that's going to be ongoing in the months and years ahead, or is there kind of an end to this?
The goal of this is that then HR can actually own the process and make the changes if there's a change that needs to be made. That's why we moved to a non-code program that would allow somebody, that's knowledgeable of the calculation itself to make the change without having to have a developer do it.
Mr. Dixon, quick. Just listen, going back to Mr. Perlman's question, I believe it was the scope of work not anticipated when we did the original scope of work? I believe that was his question.
No, this was not in the original scope of work of the upgrade.
Mrs. Gotti?
Well, I'm glad that you have all added it because I think anytime we're doing manual calculations, we run the risk of making human error.
Yep.
Computers are much smarter than we all are, so good job.
You. Roll call, please.
Ryan.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Snipe.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Godding.
Aye.
Cracky.
Aye.
Pearlman.
Aye.
8 ayes.
Motion carries. Moving on to item, we're going to jump back down to information item. Moving on to J2B, school safety update. I believe this is Ms. Soderback. And real quick, before you get into your PowerPoint, could you explain the change in that office, not just for the board, but for the community as well, with your role and what you guys are doing? Just 1 minute.
Yes. Back in August of 2018, I had the fortunate opportunity to lead and create a new division called Student and Community Services. And with that being said, we worked closely with other district chiefs to determine what would be the best departments to work, or divisions to work in our department. And so under Student and Community Services, we have the district-wide attendance initiative. We have Family and Community Relations, area that helps and resolves parent and community relations. We have due process that oversees our hearings. We have student placement, which is the enrollment and placement and transfer of students, school safety, health services, school counselors, social workers, MTSSB, and student information services.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you. With that being said, it's a wonderful opportunity to be here tonight to talk about what we've done in the area of school safety. And I have to say this not just because Dr. Logan's here, but I've been with this district for 20 years. And what we've been able to do with the support of the teachers behind us, with making sure that standard response, we've been very intentional and proactive and believe in taking a comprehensive approach to school and district safety. With that being said, safety is everyone's responsibility. One of the first things that we did is I had the fortunate opportunity of meeting with Dr. Jolene Palmer. She's the safety director for the Nebraska Department of Education, and she provided me with the school Nebraska Department of Ed safety standards. And we found out that the state of Nebraska had implemented in 2016 a program called Standard Response Protocol. With that being said, the first action step that we did is we worked with Steve Priestman and other people in our department and created binders in late July to train all of our school leaders on Standard Response Protocol. One of the most integral things about Standard Response Protocol is out of 247 districts in the state of Nebraska, 245 of them use Standard Response Protocol. Dr. Jolene Palmer has trained first responders from around the state as well as district responders to prepare that in the event that there's an issue, how to respond appropriately. And so with that being said, all principals were trained in early August at the first principals meeting. They rolled it out to their staff immediately. We then trained, we had 20 sessions that we offered throughout the next few weeks, training district operations staff, our bus drivers, our operations staff, and then obviously our teachers, not just a one-time wonder, but they consistently train students in how to respond if they hear lockout or lockdown. I think one of the most incredible things about lockout and lockdown is that it provides consistency. If our students are in an elementary school and they've been trained on Standard Response Protocol and those posters are visible all around everywhere in OPS and they hear lockdown, they know what the procedures are. If our basketball players at Central High School are playing a state tournament game in Lincoln at a venue and they hear lockdown, they will understand what those processes and procedures are. And so with that being said, it provides that common language, common signage, and then common responses for those that know what to do within the walls of the building. In addition, we've worked with Human Resources. Every employee has been trained at the start of this school year, and it is now part of the new staff orientation for all new employees. In addition to that, there's those 4 action steps: lock out, lock down, evacuate, and then also take shelter. In addition to all of the work that our schools do to practice them, they practice lockout and lockdown. Am I correct, teachers? All right. They practice them regularly, just like fire drills, to ensure that in the event there's ever an active shooter or someone causing imminent danger in the building, they can move quickly and efficiently to get to shelter. And then, because of the great work of district communications, that when a school does go into lockout or lockdown, communication goes immediately to the families to make them aware, so people are not wondering what's going on at the school. I will say the 20 additional trainings, being able to go out to all the facilities, the operations staff, the warehouse, and working with the bus drivers has really made people situationally aware. Because when we talk about safety, it's not just the Board of Education stance, it's every single person in the Omaha Public Schools. When we trained our before and after school providers and our parents at the DCAC, and also communication, it's making sure that if a parent's driving up to a school and they see something that doesn't look normal, that they can call the school and have their eyes aware, so we can have safety measures in that comprehensive approach. Really, the 2 things that we really focus on at the school level and at the district level, we just had a lockout and lockdown here at the TAC building for the first time, is really lockout means that there's a threat outside the building. And the reason we really wanted to fine-tune this is because in years past, prior to August, a principal would call in and they would put a school in lockdown. Well, when first responders hear lockdown, they think that there's imminent danger in the school and everybody is all hands on deck. When you go into lockout, that happens pretty regularly in the district. It means that there's something in the community. We work closely with the Omaha Police Department to ensure whether we need to put a school in lockout or lockdown. But business as usual, where it does not impede academic achievement and students can continue to learn within the walls of their safe school. And then lockdown means that there's imminent danger in the school. Everybody needs to take shelter, and lights, locks, out of sight, and then the first responders can come in and they know immediately that there's an issue in the building. Some of the things that we've been able to do just in the last 5 and 6 months that really are around school safety is, obviously, we just talked about standard response protocol, making sure that all employees and board members in the Omaha Public Schools and our community partners, parents and students, are trained and they understand that when and if a school is in lockout or lockdown, not to come up to the school and try to get their students out. And that's becoming very common language, not just in our district. And when we talk about consistency, if I'm a teacher that transfers from one school to the next, the procedures and the routines are the same. If I'm a 5th grader transitioning to middle school, you don't have different procedures. It's fluid throughout our system. Probably one of the most critical pieces that we're working on is the threat assessment component. We had the opportunity, and we still are working closely with Mario Scalara, who works for the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He is actually a national consultant and works with public policy. He's been an incredible support. He actually came to the district, looked at our threat assessment, and has provided us with the feedback that we need. Because to be quite honest, prior to this year, we've been all over the map. We also been working closely with Dr. Jolene Palmer, who works for NDE, to ensure that we're up to par with our threat assessment processes. And I'll talk a little bit about the upcoming school safety summit. What we did earlier on in September is Dr. Logan, Mr. Ray, Monique Farmer, myself, Dan Hayes, Nancy Bond, the head of counseling, Stephanie Hazing, the head of social worker, Amber Wachowski, we all took a team to a training to learn more about threat assessment and scenarios. And then we also had a training with the Omaha Police Department, as well as the team from Colorado that did post-response to Columbine, and has really helped help us begin to navigate what that's going to look like as we go into the school safety summit. Again, it's making sure that we're situationally aware and taking that comprehensive approach, because I always say it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And when you look at the state that we are in this country with safety, we have to ensure that we're ready, that we're prepared, and that people understand how to implement and move forward when there's a concern. And then what we've done, obviously, with the adult sexual misconduct and mandatory reporting. In January, we trained all school leaders. They then went back to their buildings. Teachers, how many of you are the training? Made sure that all of our staff are trained, and we rolled that out. We also had 13 additional sessions that we offered here in the boardroom, or we went out to our community agencies and trained our valuable stakeholders to ensure that they understand if they see something, say something, and what that process is. What we did in the Office of School Safety is we knew that we were struggling with filling vacancies each day with regards to security officers that were maybe out for illness. And so through the support of all of you, I guess, and Mr. Wakefield, we were able to add 3 floaters that now when a security officer is out, we look at our highest needs buildings ranging from our high schools to our alternative schools to other programs to ensure that we have a floater report there, and that's been very helpful. We've hired 2 of the 3, and so that's really going to help maintain that safety at the school level. In addition, for the first time, well, I've been told, in decades, we've been providing training to our security officers. At the beginning of the year, we provided training to all of our security officers around adverse childhood experiences and understanding that sometimes when our students have concerns, it's not that they're students that have behavior issues. Behavior is a form of communication. We shared the video with them removed, which was eye-opening for them to see a child going through a lot of adversity in the home. We also provided training to them around compassion fatigue. I give credit to Ms. Sandy Bender out at ILP. And then we provided Stop the Bleed training with organizations to help train them on how to stop an injury in an event that there would be a major issue. One thing that we're very, very excited about, and I give credit to Ms. Jocelyn Perkins, is we were able to, this last few months, write a grant, and I believe it was about $800,000. Our security officers and our SROs will be mandatorily trained on MANT, which there's, I believe there's, it's a 4-day comprehensive integrated approach to de-escalating behaviors with our students, and to be able to provide our security officers with skilled training around MANT, how to, when they go to a room, to work with the student to help them de-escalate. They'll be mandatorily trained on that, and then that will be an annual training that we provide through certification. We're also going to train trainers, and then we're going to provide that for our SROs too, because they're the ones that when you get a call, they go to the classroom. When a student's at a level 10, being able to work with them and understand it's going to be okay and help de-escalate rather escalate. And that training will be coming. Our next steps in school in overall safety is we have the Nebraska Department of Ed is working with Mr. Morrison, who's our safety supervisor. He's been sprinting these last few months. He came on board, I think, at the end of December, and the Nebraska Department of Ed is now going to be doing safety audits in every one of our schools and programs between now and, I believe, the end of March 1st. The good thing about the safety audits is it's really going to be able to provide the state with feedback as to how they can better support us, and then really give us our glows and grows so we can, again, be proactive and take that comprehensive approach to ensure that every building and every staff member and community member that is a part of our day is safe. And then we're looking currently at the staffing in our school safety office. We have really 2 full-time people that do oversee all the security, all the training, all the threat assessments, and so we're looking currently at that. And then something that we are extremely excited about is, in the past, we've had the Summer Principals Institute. And what we're doing this year is we're providing a school safety summit. And so Mr. Morrison, Dr. Nancy Bond, Amber Wachowski, Stephanie Hazing, and myself are working closely with Mario Scalara, Jolene Palmer from the state, and then other important community partners to provide a high-quality threat assessment training for all of our school teams. And the grant that we wrote with Jocelyn Perkins will be used, where every school will bring a team of approximately 5 people school, the principal, an assistant, or another administrator, the school security guard, as well as the counselor, the social worker, and another member of their team, and they will actually be trained and walk out with a binder that has a clear process in our district as to responding to suicidal ideation as well as threat assessments. And it will be clear, level 1, level 2, and level 3. And so that will be taking place, I have it on here. Yes, right there, May 30th. And that will be, and obviously we'll more than likely extend an invitation to you to join us because it's important that you understand. And that's really going to give us a comprehensive approach to when a student has an issue, instead of putting them in a situation where they may say it's a level 3, there'll be a detailed flow chart and indicators as to what level those threats are to ensure that we're providing supports with our students and getting them the help that they need.
We'll open it up for board members, but before that, thank you so much for this update. I'm very anxious and excited for this update, and thank you for everything you've done. You've been hitting the ground sprinting yourself, and also thank you to Dr. Logan. And when she interviewed for the job, she talked about school safety, and she's obviously stayed to her word on that and made it a top priority for the district, reorganizing that office, putting the right people in, and making sure that our students are safe, our teachers are safe, as well as our parents that enter our buildings. So,
Does everybody have their standard response?
I do. And for the board, by the way, that special, what do you call those things?
The key rings.
Yeah,
we'll get them for you.
Every board member gets one on the house. So
that's right. That's right.
All righty. Thank you.
Yep.
Question?
Oh, do you have a question, Mr. Perlman? Sorry.
How are you tonight?
Pretty good.
Just a quick question. The Adverse Childhood Experiences survey, is that something that's done now?
We did not give the survey, the ACES survey. That is something that when a social worker is working with a student or a family, when they work with them, they're able to gather that information. We wanted to make sure that our security officers were aware of the adversity that our children bring, and behavior is a form of communication, and so that was the first step in getting them to understand.
Is that questionnaire, survey, whatever it's termed, is that ever administered just broadly to students?
I have to be honest, I do not believe so. I do not have the answer to that question, but I do not, because that's very confidential information.
Right.
I know that when our social workers work with our students and our counselors, they are probably able to collect some of that information to determine what levels of support that they can align to families.
Okay. And what sort of training was given to staff about how to respond to disclosures from their students? Like who provided that training?
Disclosures with regards to?
Abuse.
With mandatory reporting?
Well, more than mandatory reporting, the best practices for responding to disclosure of abuse.
Well, we followed the state statute 28711 that's always been on the books.
Well, I'm not worried about mandatory reporting. That's a whole separate subject. I'm talking about the best way to deal with it as far as just all the other aspects. I mean, it's a very critical time in a child's life, and I just want to make sure that the responses are consistent and appropriate for, we're talking about 5-year-olds to 16-year-olds who are disclosing abuse, typically from folks inside their home.
Thank you for your question. It's really, we work very closely with Project Harmony, so we refer students right away to Project Harmony. All of our counselors and our social workers have a direct line to and access Project Harmony regularly so that students can get assistance immediately. We have students referred every day, and students are, we just had one on the day we were off where we had an issue where a child was dropped off and so on and so forth, and a very adverse situation, and the child was taken right away, so, yeah.
Well, I can tell you, in my day job, that's what I deal with every day, and the work that I see from some OPS staff and administration has just been excellent, and so I just want to make sure that it stays that way and consistent, because it's absolutely critical, and I just want to applaud OPS staff, teachers, and counselors and principals, because everything I've seen, they do an amazing job at that.
Thank
So
you. It's definitely a collaborative effort, and we use connections regularly, too, with our social workers and counselors. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item J2C, Strategic Plan Scorecard Results. We'll have research.
Mr. Schmidt-Bonnie, Mr. Ray, how are you? Very well, thank you. The clicker does work. Good evening. First, we'll start with a quick overview of the scorecard and the process that underlies it. The purpose of the scorecard, as many of you know, is to track progress towards outcome goals set forth in the strategic plan. It shows the yearly results for each goal, as well as our overall goal that we're shooting for at the end of the 5-year period. There's some color coding on the document, which you may have noted. Green indicates progress towards a goal. Yellow, performance did not differ from one year to the next. And then red, yearly outcomes moved away from the goal. There is also a couple symbols that differ across the document. Those are stars, which indicates that something unplanned impacted the year's results, unplanned meaning prior to the strategic plan, or how the metric was calculated was refined. The year in which that happened, the data is underlined to indicate when that changed, and then there, next to the stem where it talks about what we're measuring, there are some asterisks, which you can look below the table that'll tell you what specifically changed in the spirit of full transparency. Dots indicate that nothing has changed in how we calculate the metrics since they were adopted into the strategic plan. As you all know from prior presentations, much has changed in the way of state testing, and this has impacted our scorecard. Specifically, some goals are no longer applicable given significant changes to both the standards and the assessments that they are aligned to, and in the case of writing, the assessment has gone away altogether. We've kept that historical look kind of frozen in time, if you will, in the last year that the data was applicable, and then have added the additional measures, though you'll note they're without goals, given that we didn't set goals for them, because we couldn't have necessarily foretold they were coming during the strategic planning process. Tick through a summary of our results. I'll start with the good. We had our 5-year graduation rate went up. 139 more kids were able to walk across the stage and get that diploma. Our dropout rate decreased to nearly 2014-15 levels. We saw an increase in dual enrollment, those students enrolling for both OPS credit as well as college credit. As a result of state testing changes, 100% of our graduates left last year with an ACT test score, so that's very exciting for those students. Student engagement went up, as did feelings of school connectiveness, which is a submeasure of engagement. The number of students opting out of the district continued a 3-year decline. The percentage of students suspended or expelled was down from 16-17 levels. Some great results, in my opinion. Gaps were reduced across many groups. First, talking about the English language arts assessment, we saw the gap between Hispanic and white students and Asian and white students go down. Free and reduced lunch and full-paced students, the gap was reduced there as well. A consistent one, as I mentioned before, EL versus non-EL, as well as refugee versus non-refugee, the gaps closed there as well for ELA in the second year of that assessment. Looking to science, our gap between Hispanic and white students declined. Again, we saw the EL, non-EL gap shrink, as well as the refugee, non-refugee gap, and the male versus female gap. Though math was a new year of testing, or a new test aligned to the new college and career readiness standards, we did list those gaps, and it's good to see that the EL versus non-EL, as well as refugee versus non-refugee gaps are in the single digits, and there is no gap between males and females on the new math tests. Moving on to some of our opportunities that still remain. 4-year graduation rates slipped just a little bit, less than 1%, though we did see the number of graduates go up. It was just a larger class. The percentage of students who are on track did decline slightly, about 1%. Absenteeism increased in 17-18. The percentage of students scoring proficient or advanced declined in ELA and science, as was the case at the state level as well. Additionally, those gaps that did not close remained or widened. That's a brief summary of the metrics available on the scorecard, which has been attached to this presentation and is available for yours and the public's view. I'll now avail myself to any questions.
Mrs. Gotti?
I have a question, but it might be more for Dr. Logan, so we'll see. I guess I'm curious to know, because I think, and you and I have had conversations, the two most important things, clearly high-quality teacher in the classroom and curriculum. What opportunities do you see for curriculum changes in the district, or can what we currently have, can we enhance that to assist us with delivery?
Well, I'll first start off by saying the most important thing is having a highly effective teacher in the classroom. The second thing is in our ELA with our K-5, we have really, as a matter of fact, I was in a class at Highland today, and the kids were doing amazing. They do need new texts. Those texts are about, I know that I purchased those in 2005 as a principal, and they need texts that are more aligned. I hear that every time I meet with a teacher group. I hear with teachers in schools, I hear that from elementary teachers, especially that we need ELA. I think the most important thing is for us to focus on our Tier 1 instruction. That's instruction that everybody gets in our schools. On the math side, I know that we recently adopted the math instructional resources. I do think we have an opportunity there to augment some of our resources to bump up the level of expectations in mathematics, to teach our students to be better problem solvers, and in mathematics, we actually did receive a grant as well to have a significant training for our teachers starting this summer, with schools signing up to go as a cohort, because the research says that if you don't have an administrator that's as vested in the improving instruction, then it won't work, and the administrator needs to go alongside the teacher. So we are doing that. We will roll it out this summer, and then all schools over the next 3 years will have an opportunity to participate in significant training for teachers. But I always believe that it's the opportunity to enhance skills for our highly effective folks, so that they are prepared to deliver the standards as they are now. And I think that that is also an area that I see often of mismatch, in that because the standards have changed so dramatically, and we have to be able to change along, or we have to adjust our expectations. I frequently, and I will continually give this because everybody understands it, the expectation of multiplication. I was in a classroom today, kids had to reduce the fraction down to the lowest common denominator, and they were in the 3rd grade. So they were adding fractions, and then when they got to the sum, they needed to reduce, and that's the expectation, and it's significantly different than what people remember from when they were in school, and especially if they started teaching when I started teaching, were in school when I was in elementary school, so I think that those are some of the significant, those are the issues that we have around. It's really about opportunity to continue to develop our teachers and provide opportunities for them to understand what the state standards expect students to do. I will say also that Nebraska was later than most states in changing to college and career readiness standards. My home state changed those standards in 2010, so there's a lot of work to do. So if we're looking at where our ACT results are lagging, a part of that is that's part of the issue, in that most states changed quite a bit ago.
Thank you for that.
Sure. Any other questions, comments from board members? Well, Mr. Smith-Monty, thank you so much for presenting and sticking through this entire 5-year process. If I'm correct, this is the end of the strategic plan.
That's my understanding as well.
So it is coming to a wrap. So there's a few board members that were on here. I think only 2 of us when we started this process. And it's exciting to start a new process with the current board we have now on our strategies and initiatives. And obviously, Dr. Logan won't have over so many. So thank you again.
Couldn't agree more.
Moving on to item J2D, policy 4040 and policy 8150. Can I just do it at the end? I'm sorry, I already read it. Thank you. Mr. Ray will, and I do believe the social media policies in there is talking about adding Instagram in there, which this policy always gets updated every few years. And then we are internal board policies, we are merging policy and board governance. And I do believe, Mr. Ray, this did come up in not legislative, but policy committee.
Correct. Both policies were voted on by the policy committee to move forward to the full board. This is information with the items coming back as first reading at the next board meeting.
Thank you. So if you guys have any questions or anything like that, Mr. Perlman?
Yeah, I have a question, and this came up either last year or the year before. There was an attempt to merge the policy and the board governance committee. Can you just explain the purpose for doing that?
My purpose or the committee's purpose?
Committees.
So I think the purpose of that was last year we didn't, my mics are really loud, guys, have a lot of board governance meetings, and so because that is policy related, we decided to put it together so that the policy committee can also do that and then bring forth anything that comes in regards to how we function as a board to the board. One less committee for people to sit on.
Any other questions? All right, moving on to item J. So I'm sorry, when we pulled, Mr. Perlman wanted item I-1A pulled off, and we skipped it, so we're going to go back up to, and it's now classified as J1D. It's the minutes from the Friday, February 1st. Mr. Perlman, do you have anything?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to pull this off the consent agenda to just make sure everyone took a nice close look at the minutes from this meeting. It was going to be a board retreat 2 days before. We were told it was going to be a board workshop, and it was held upstairs on the 5th floor on a Friday at noon. And I would just urge board leadership to never do that again. We should have our board meetings and board workshops at a more conspicuous public location. We had some pretty heavy topics on there. It was a 5-hour meeting. We talked about, some of the things we talked about for a second time tonight, but we talked about NSCAS and standard response protocol, spent a good deal of time talking about Omaha Schools employee retirement systems and some actuarial studies, and we did record it in case anyone wants to listen to it. It's not very exciting, but it's some of the most important it's probably the most important topics that I think that have been in front of this board in the 2 years that I've been on the board. So I guess I was really surprised that it took place that Friday at noon on the 5th floor next to the cafeteria. And so let's please not ever do that again.
Also, the media was present as well, so thank you, Emily, for attending that, and thank you, board members, for being able to attend that. It's always needed. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from that February 1st.
Move approval.
There's a motion by Ms. Crackey, second by
I'll second it.
Mrs. Cassidy. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Smith.
Aye.
Snipe. Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Gadding.
Aye.
Cracky.
Aye.
Pearlman.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
8 aye.
Motion carries. There is a receipt, reports of, if I'm correct, CBOC Phase 1 and Phase 2 update from January 2019 for board members to review. Mrs. Cassidy.
I move that the Board of Education go into closed session for the protection of the public interest and for the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of individuals to discuss with the superintendent, secretary to the board, and legal counsel, negotiations, legal advice, and potential litigation.
There's a motion on the floor to go into closed session. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Snipe. Roll call, please.
Snipe.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Gadding.
Aye.
Cracky.
Aye.
Pearlman.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
8 aye.
Motion carries. Let me remind the board that the purpose for closed session is for the protection of the public interest and for the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of individuals, to discuss with the superintendent, secretary to the board, and legal counsel negotiations, legal advice, and potential litigation. Let the record reflect the board went into closed session at 8:29. It's horrible. Let the record reflect the board came out of closed session at 9:02. Meeting's adjourned at 9:02.